today's webinar is a joint effort from us at ExamPal and PrepAdviser. And we're going to start off with PrepAdviser, and they're going to talk a bit about assessing your application. And after that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to teach you how to get the winning strategy for a 760 on your GMAT. So we'll start off by passing it over to PrepAdviser.
My name is Iliana Bobova. I'm head of admissions consulting at PrepAdviser. And today I will tell you about how business schools evaluate your profile and how you should prepare for a profile evaluation. Just very quickly on this first slide, I want you to know that I've been on all sides of this process. I worked as a recruitment and admissions counselor for executive MBA, MBA Masters, and bachelor's programs. And I've also been on the other side advising prospective students like you on their application preparation. So this is just for you to understand what perspective I have when I'm speaking to you tonight. Another organizational announcement is that I will be taking all of your individual questions on Monday during the live chat, which will take place on PrepAdviser. On the homepage, when you go, there will be an open live chat between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock Central European Summer Time. And this is just for 1 hour live. And throughout the day, you can also post all of your questions in the forum on PrepAdviser. There is a topic open there. And I will be able to respond to your questions during the whole day on Monday. So now let's focus on this presentation, which aims to give you an idea about what business schools look for in your profile, what makes your MBA profile, and connecting to the presentation of David from ExamPal, how the test scores, especially the GMAT test scores, play a role in this profile evaluation. So basically, you can have your profile evaluated at two stages. Stage one is before you even apply to a business school. During the school selection process, during the research, during the research that will help you decide where to apply for admission. This is important for you to understand for an MBA, for what caliber of MBA programs and schools you're qualified, and to build your initial application strategy. So I guess many of you haven't thought about it, but the profile evaluation is a great tool to use during the school selection research. And it's actually great to have your profile evaluated as early as you start thinking about doing an MBA. A profile evaluation at this early stage can also help you find out whether now is the right time in your career to plunge into MBA studies, or maybe you should wait for a while. And even this evaluation can help you realize if the MBA is actually not the right step for you. And although these two things might sound like negative results, they are very essential decisions for you career-wise. So it's good to consider a profile evaluation at the early stages. So how you can have your profile evaluated? Like level 1 is using some automatic online profile evaluation tools on different websites. PrepAdviser has different options for that. These tools can be helpful to give you a general idea of whether you're eligible and for what caliber of schools you're eligible. Some of those tools can also provide an initial list of schools for which you're a good fit. but this is, again, just some guideline for you. This should not be your final shortlisted schools. When you use these online tools, you have to make sure you understand the algorithm, you understand how many schools are included in their database, how they have been pre-selected, so that you know how to interpret the results. But the online tools are, again, a good first step to give you an idea about where you stand with your overall MBA profile. Another option is to go for expert or admissions coach evaluation of your MBA profile. And this is helpful in different ways. First, it's usually interactive. It could be face-to-face. It could be online. And the value is that you can really ask a lot of questions to the expert and understand the strengths of your profile, as well as the areas where you can improve. And if you do this evaluation early, before you even select the schools, this will give you a lot of helpful information about what schools to target, but also what you can work on to build a really strong application. And finally, a third option for this early stage is to contact some business schools officers to give you feedback on how well your profile fits their program. So again, there are different options. Some business schools do have a profile evaluation online where you either submit details over a data form on the website, or you send over your CV, and then an admissions officer responds to you with feedback about whether they encourage you to apply to their program, whether they think you fit the requirements, and whether they see any hurdles to your application. Also, other options are to contact admissions officers face-to-face and request their feedback on your profile. And this can be done usually at one-to-one meetings with business schools. For example, one-to-one meetings at Access MBA events or Access Masters events, or during sometimes during live chats or webinars. You can also ask, but then you can ask specific questions about elements of your profile. The limitations of having feedback from admissions officers at this early stage is that they are in a position to only evaluate your eligibility for their program, for their schools. So if you're wondering whether a dream school is a good fit for you, or it is a stretch for you, you can approach admissions officers at this early stage so that you know whether at all to consider the school for your application, or whether to consider it now or to postpone your application in order to improve. Okay, so these are all steps that you can take during the school selection process. The next stage during which you can have, and you will have, an evaluation of your profile is actually during the application process. And here I have listed the different people and types of positions who will be eventually reviewing your application, either while you are still preparing the application or after you have submitted your application. And it's good to to realize that there is not just one person. There is a committee that is usually reviewing the applications, and each person in this committee has a different perspective and will be looking for different information in an application package. So usually the first people who see the application or elements of it are the admissions officers, and they work with you all the way through submitting your application. You can meet them face-to-face, as I already said, at different events or during campus visits or during webinars. They can guide you while you develop the application package if you have any questions. Also, admissions officers usually are present at the admissions committees, and they can sometimes present your application. So it's good to have a good contact with the admissions officers and to provide them as much information about you and to leave them good impressions. But you have to note something. They can't influence the admissions committee providing additional information about you if this information is not available on the application package, if it doesn't appear on the documents that you're submitting. So you should make sure that all the details are in writing in any of the documents of the application package. Okay, so when your application package goes to the admissions committee, usually there are a number of people sitting there. So first you have the admissions director. Then, as I mentioned, you often have the admissions officers. Then you have the MBA program director. You might have current students or alumni. You might also have the career center director. So you can see that you realize that each of these people have a different perspective on your application. Like the admissions director will be looking at your eligibility for the program. The program director will be looking more into your academic potential, into the unique experience that you're bringing to the program, and whether it will really make a contribution to the MBA class, because peer learning is really something important in MBA classrooms. So the admissions committee needs to put up a class where everyone brings a unique experience so that people can learn as much as possible from each other. Then you can have current students and alumni who have their own perspective of being part of the school, and then they can see your application through their own eyes. And a very important role is the one of the career services or career center director. Why it's more and more often that these people are part of the application committee? It's because for MBA application, the relevance of your career goals to the particular MBA program is of great importance for the success of your application. You know, business schools want their students to be happy, to be great ambassadors of the program after they graduate. Business schools want their MBA students to be successful, to land their dream jobs after graduation. So during this early stage, during the application, they consider whether your career goal is something that the school can help you achieve. And if the school and if the committee feels that your goal is not something that the school can contribute to, then they might reject your application for admission. Because why? Because if they admit you, you will be unhappy because you will not receive what you need, and then you will not be a good ambassador for the school. So I have seen in my practice a number of cases where applicants either didn't choose the school to be adequate to their career goals, or in their application form they failed to explain well enough their career goals and how the program can help them meet the goals. Okay, so the moral of the story from this slide is to have into consideration the different people that will be looking at your application, and make sure that you provide data and information and real-life examples that will support your application in the eyes of these people. So actually, what is it, an MBA profile? What is a business school profile? So here is a list of what actually builds your profile. So first, an MBA is a master's degree. It's for you going to graduate school, which means that there are some academic requirements that you have to meet. MBA programs require a minimum of bachelor's degree. People with a master's degree can also apply, but these are minimum academic requirements that you have to meet. Then for MBA, there are certain professional qualifications that are also taken into consideration. For example, years of work experience, and here it is full-time work experience that matters, is taken into consideration. And business schools do not have limitations on age to admit you to an MBA program, but they rather speak in terms of work experience. They might say we need minimum 2 years of work experience, but maximum 5 for a full-time MBA program. Or we might require minimum 5 years for an MBA program. They might also require managerial experience, not just any work experience, but managerial experience. Another important factor is the relevance of work experience. An MBA is for people who want to have a career as business leaders and managers. So even if programs do not require that you already have a managerial experience, it's good that you demonstrate that you have the potential to grow as a manager and as a business leader through your career progression so far, through the types of responsibilities that you have taken so far in your career. So I mean, these two elements, years of work experience, relevance of work experience, are part of this professional evaluation, whether you qualify for an MBA. Another important factor is your aptitude. So whether you have the skills and knowledge to succeed in graduate school in a management program. So they might be looking at your GPA, your scores from your first university degree or from your master's degree, just to make sure you have the capacity to work in a higher academic level setting. Then again, as I said, they will be looking at the quality of your work experience, again, looking for this potential for you to develop as a manager and business leader. They will also be checking your academic and professional interests. Everyone has some academic background from the bachelor's degree or master's degree and has some professional interests, but they're looking for a match between what the school offers and what you actually need and have the potential for. For example, whether you want to focus more on strategy or more on finance in the program, and whether you have the background to do that. So this is also part of the check and part of what builds your profile. And finally, there are a number of factors through which they check whether you can succeed in business schools, whether you have the language skills to study complicated academic subjects entirely taught in English, and you need to have all the skills, not just speaking, not just reading, not just writing, but all of them, because you will need all of them in the classroom and on campus. And last but definitely not least, an MBA program requires strong analytical and quantitative skills, and sometimes, or for some master's programs, subject matter skills. So there are internationally recognized tests like the GMAT, general or jury subject tests that speak about your skills. They're evidence of your analytical and quantitative skills. So all these factors are part of your profile, and they will be evaluated by the admissions committee or by the profile evaluator. So, and here is the process. Of course, business schools have different practices, but usually they evaluate these three things: qualifications and eligibility, potential for success, and the X factors. So, and here I want to highlight the eligibility requirements are something fixed. You either meet them or you don't meet them. This is the basics. If you don't meet them, you don't stand chances for admission. So the first thing is that the admissions officers make sure you meet the requirements, whether you have the bachelor's degree minimum or higher, whether you have the work experience they require in terms of years and in terms of quality. Sometimes they can mention an age range also, but as I already said, it's primarily through the work experience. Then come the tests: language skills through TOEFL, IELTS, etc. Aptitude skills primarily through the GMAT for MBA studies. And the important thing here to realize is that these tests can be a pre-selector for top schools. So top schools might start reviewing your application from your scores. And if they see that your GMAT score is not enough, doesn't meet their minimum requirement, then this is again a factor to reject you at the early stage of selection, at pre-selection. So test scores can really play a crucial role in the application. And then at the next stage, as I already mentioned, they consider the factors that really make a difference between applicants in terms of their profile: their unique experiences, their potential for contribution to the learning environment in the classroom, their potential to grow as managers, again, the adequacy of their career plans, and how the school can help them achieve their plans. So this is briefly an outline of the evaluation process and of the elements that build your MBA profile. And I will be glad to get into more details and respond to questions individually on Monday through the live chat and the forum. On PrepAdviser, you can find a lot of much more detailed resources on the topic. So I hope to answer any questions on Monday. And now I would like to give the floor to David, who will speak about this crucial element, the GMAT test, because the GMAT test is essential for convincing the committee that you have the potential, the analytical and the quantitative skills to succeed in the demanding MBA programs. And this is particularly important for people who don't come from an engineering background or from a finance background. And the GMAT is really a great way for them to show off the skills that are so essential, they're life-saving in the MBA classroom. Thank you for your attention. David?
All right, Iliana, thank you very much for all that information on setting up your application profile and for the links. And I hope this live chat, and note that 2 links have been put into chat, which you can follow to look about the topics. So we're going to switch over to the GMAT itself. And before we start, just so I sort of get a feel for the people here with me today, I'd like to ask a short survey. I'll take a short survey. Just 1 second. And let's do the survey in chat. So how many of you have taken the GMAT before? So just write in chat if you've taken the GMAT before. All right, so there's a bit of yeses, but there's quite a bit more of no's. So for most of you, this is the first time taking your GMAT. So that's perfect. So what we're going to do today, essentially, is we're going to focus in on how you can join what we'd like to call the 700 Club, which is essentially how you can break the score of 700. And essentially, this talk will be divided into 3 parts. The first part is going to talk about the tools that you need to get 700, which are cognitive flexibility and rapid improvement, and we'll talk about those along the way. And the second part, we'll talk about the winning study plan, which is how do you implement these ideas into an actual day-by-day study plan, including the material that you have to go over. So before we start, I'd just like to introduce the company for those of you not familiar with us. So ExamPal was founded by essentially test prep teachers. We've been in the business for 20 or so years, teaching regular brick and mortar classrooms. And what we realized is that one size does not fit all. And so we built an online platform where we could work with students from all around the world. And we use machine learning along with crowd wisdom, and I'll explain a bit more how this works later on, in order to personalize the question and solution approach. And this isn't just an online platform. We're also in the background, and we offer support via chat for any specific questions our students have. If you like, you can open up a free account with us, and you can use this on various types of technologies. So the 700 Club, how do you get a 700? And the first thing that you need to realize is that breaking the 700, or maybe you don't even need a 700, maybe you just need a 600 or a 650. Different schools have different requirements. But whatever the score that you need to realize that getting that score on the GMAT is not about being super smart. It's not about having a world of knowledge. You don't need to be a math major. As Iliana said, any type of major can succeed in the GMAT. And the GMAT is also used to prove that not only engineers and finance students can succeed, but also others. And so essentially it's about skills, like I said before. It's about developing the right set of skills and learning how to apply knowledge in the GMAT. And what many people also don't realize, or rather they realize it too late in the process, is that the GMAT is not about just practice, 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 practice. The famous adage that practice makes perfect does not work here. Because what you really need to do is you need to understand what the best methods to solve each question are, and you need to understand, you need to learn yourself. You need to learn which methods work best for you. And really, this boils down to timing. So the hardest thing on the GMAT isn't the material. All of the material on the GMAT is more or less high school material. All right, all of the maths are basically high school level. The logic is just basic sort of everyday logic in the verbal section, and the vocabulary, maybe you'll need to work on it a bit, maybe not, depending on your personal level. So what is the trick? What is the catch? Why is it so difficult? It's difficult because you don't have time. You only have 2 minutes on average per question in the quant section, and a bit less than that in the verbal section. And even if you could translate into equations and write everything down properly and do a full analysis and get to the right answer, usually you just don't have the time to do that. And this is why you need cognitive flexibility. This is why you need to develop the ability to find the fastest way to get to the correct answer, and then you need to apply that. And this is essentially what we teach at ExamPal. And this is what we call the PAL algorithm, where the PAL stands for precise, which is basically the methods that you're probably used to from college or from high school. This is essentially taking a question, maybe a linear equation, I don't know, x squared plus 5 minus 2x equals 0, and trying to find the roots of it by using various exact equations. Alternative methods are usually different, they're like orthogonal. They're a completely different type of method you can use to solve questions. And how do they work? They work by getting you to the right answer. These are not guesses, but you sometimes don't know why that answer is right. So for example, if your question asks you about a certain range of something or another, and you see that 4 out of the 5 answers are impossible, they're talking about numbers that are too small or too big, they can't possibly be the right answer, then you know that the 5th number is the correct answer. Now, you haven't plugged anything into an equation. You haven't fully solved it. If someone were to ask you, why is this the right answer? You wouldn't know. But the point is, it doesn't matter. The GMAT does not actually test if you can provide a full explanation for the question. It tests if you can find the way to get to the right answer. And if I can add a personal note, this is also important for business and for life afterwards. So sometimes you need to know how to get to the end goal as quickly as possible. And the third part of PAL, this is logical, usually relies on deeper properties, on deeper understanding of the material, such as, for example, symmetry in geometry questions, or in ratios and expressions, expanding a ratio. So for example, the idea that a ratio of 1 to 2 is the same as a ratio of 2 to 4, and it's the same as a ratio of 5 to 10, this is a logical property. Or for example, the property that an even number plus another even number is always even, this is a logical property. You don't actually need to write things down into equations in order to understand that an even plus an even equals an even. And so to tie it back in, we're talking about cognitive flexibility. We're talking about these different approaches for answering questions. And the question that you need to ask yourself while you're studying is, what are a question's different characteristics? And what are my personal strengths and weaknesses as a student? Am I really good with equations or really bad with them? Do I know how to guess numbers which will help show me what the exam writer is trying to ask? Do I know how to use the answers properly? Which is my preferred approach to solve a specific question? And this is what we do. And this is, again, as I started off by saying, we're a bunch of teachers, basically, who, with a bunch of tech wizards, have built up the platform. And we suggest different solutions to each student. And as you use, and I'll explain how this works later on, but as you use the platform, we learn how you think, we learn how you solve questions and what mistakes you make, and then we suggest the right solution for you. And even if you're studying by books or with a different company, this is definitely something you need to do for yourself. So you need to learn to identify which questions should be solved with which approaches and which approaches work for you. And so I'm going to go through a few questions which sort of make all these ideas that I've been talking about concrete. And so what we're going to do, and keep in mind that the prime difficulty of the GMAT is timing. I'm going to flash the first question on the screen for, say, maybe 10 to 20 seconds. And I'd like you to read it. And I'd like you to think for yourself, how should I solve this question? Should I solve this question by trying to translate it into equations and fully solving the equations? Should I solve, this is a precise approach. Should I solve the question by maybe looking for some kind of shortcut which gets to the answer without actually solving it? Some way of using the answers, perhaps, which is an alternative approach. Or is there maybe some sort of hidden logic underneath the question which can allow me to circumvent calculations and get straight to the right answer? This is a logical approach. So this is the question. You have 20 seconds to read it and to arrive at some sort of decision. And then I'm going to pop up a survey and see what you think. Okay, time is up. So the survey should be on your screen now. How do you think? How would you solve this question? All right, cool. So their answers. Their survey results should be there on your screen now. And what you can see is that, and this is very, very typical, especially for people who've never taken the GMAT before, is that the vast majority of people go with precise approaches, which is to say they look at a question, they realize that they can translate it into equations, and every single GMAT question can be translated to equation. This is something important to realize. Every single question is solvable. These aren't research questions. These are questions that have a right answer. If you follow the yellow brick road, you'll get to that answer. The question is, will you get to it quickly enough? And so let's take a look at our question again. The number of rooms at Hotel G is 10 less than twice the number of rooms at Hotel H. If the total number of rooms at Hotel G and Hotel H is 425, what is the number of rooms at Hotel G? So let's sort of follow the yellow brick road for a start, which is to say follow the precise approach. And so G is 10 less than twice H. We can write this out as G equals 2H minus 10. And then we can do a bunch more work. We can write that the sum of the rooms minus 10 is 425. So that's H plus 2H minus 10 is 425. We can isolate H. We can figure out that there are 145 rooms in Hotel H. And then we can calculate that G equals 2 times 24, 45, minus 10, 290, 280. The answer is E. And we have successfully solved this question. All right? And this works. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, success on the GMAT is all about cognitive flexibility. It is about realizing which approaches work on a given question, and it's about realizing which approaches work for you. Okay? And so if this is how you roll, then do it. It works. And what I'd like to say is that usually it takes a bit of time for this to work. So it takes our students around 1.5 minutes or so on average. This is because it takes time to figure out what the question is asking and figure out how to translate it into equations, and then to actually run through all of the math. And again, it depends on you, how quick or slow you are at this. Let's look at the alternative approach. What else could we have done to solve this question? And one way to say it is say, well, I don't really want to try putting everything into equations. It maybe just looks too complicated to me, and I don't know how to do it. So let's just say that C is the answer. I'm going to say that, let's say C is the answer and see what happens. So if the number of rooms at Hotel G is C, is 200, well, we know that, at Hotel H, at Hotel G is 200. Then Hotel H has about half of that. So it has about 100 rooms, which means that H and G together have about 300 rooms. That's nowhere near enough. We need about 425 rooms. So C is definitely too small. All right? And then we can look at D, and we can repeat the same process. And we can say, okay, let's say Hotel G has 240 rooms. So Hotel H has about half of that. Then together they have about 240 and 120. It's about 360. No, still too small. And so we know it's got to be bigger. We know it's got to be E, but if we want, we can verify this. So let's say that E has about 280 rooms. So H has about half that, has about 140. Together they come to 420, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I'd like to sort of reiterate that this is sort of how the alternative method works. So you didn't actually solve the question rigorously. You didn't put it into equations, you didn't calculate, and you didn't arrive at the answer via strict mathematical operations, but you did get to the right answer. And you have to realize that alternative methods and these types of methods, they're not guesses. I'm not sort of sitting here wondering whether it's E or not. I know that the answer is E because I know that this is the only possible answer that works amongst the 5. Okay. And as a final point, I'll say that people who realize this approach or people who implement this take a lot less time to answer the question. And again, this is all about personalization. So this is all about which method works best for you. And this is what you need to learn during your GMAT prep. Okay, so let's look at another question. And this question we'll go through with a logical fashion. All right, so on a 3-day fishing trip, 4 adults consumed food costing $60. For the same food cost per person per day, what would be the cost of food consumed by 7 adults during a 5-day fishing trip? Okay, so again, what we could do is we could write this down as equations and then sort of divide and multiply and do all that kind of stuff. And we can also just use the fact that the ratios are preserved even if we expand or reduce them. And what do I mean by this? I mean that if instead of a 3-day fishing trip, this was a 1-day fishing trip, then instead of $60, it would need to cost $20 because it's a third of the time and therefore it costs a third of the money. And if instead of 4 adults, we had 1 adult, then we could divide that money by another 4, and we see that we have $5 per adult per day. And so now that we know that we need $5 per adult per day, then all we need to do is multiply it by 7 adults and by 5 days to have our answer. And again, we can either estimate that this is around 150, 200, or we can actually calculate and see that this is answer number B. And this is short. This is relatively fast. Like if I go back up to the top slide, then I didn't write down any equations at all. I just sort of looked at my 3 to 4 to 60, and then I changed that to 1 to 4 to 20, and then I changed it to 1 to 1 to 5, and then I multiplied the numbers, and that's it. I was done. And again, this is all about timing, and this is all about finding which strategies work quickly for you. Okay, and now we're going to switch over to a few verbal questions. And what I want to emphasize about verbal, especially for those of you who aren't native English speakers, is that most students waste an enormous amount of time on the verbal section. And they do this because they try reading every single one of the answers, especially in, for example, critical reasoning, where if, for those of you not familiar, we're going to see a question shortly, but what happens in critical reasoning is that you're given a short passage, a logical passage, and you need to understand what the logic of the passage is. And then you're asked a question like, what are the assumptions behind this logic? Or what would strengthen this argument? Or what would weaken it? And then you have 5 answer choices. And you need to read every single one of them, or hopefully not. And you need to understand them. And you need to figure out which of them does it and which doesn't, which is to say which answers the question. And what usually happens is that people get really, really confused. And maybe I'll just switch over the question so you understand what I mean. So this is a critical reasoning question. Let's read it. The interview is an essential part of a successful hiring program because with it, job applicants who have personalities that are unsuited to the requirements of the job will be eliminated from consideration. This argument logically depends on which of the following assumptions. Now, the naive approach for most students, and even for sometimes for more experienced students, is to just start reading the options. It's to go to A and say, well, a hiring program will be successful if it includes interviews. And then they think about it. Is this an assumption? Is this not an assumption? They go back to the question stem, they read it. They do the same for B, the same for C, the same for D, the same for E. This takes a long, 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 long time. And it's really not necessary at all. And so quite a lot of the methods for success on verbal are about inference. They're about learning how to guess what the right answer is going to look like before looking at the answers, which is to say forming an opinion about this question before looking at the answers and then looking at it. All right, so let's go over the set question together. And so first we want to break down the question into its logical components. All right, and we like to do this with a flowchart. And so what this question is saying is that an interview is successful because it can eliminate people with unsuitable personalities. All right, that is the whole logic of the sentence. And then if you're thinking about an assumption that is behind this specific argument, then you're essentially looking for an arrow leading into unsuitable personalities. You're looking for something that is absolutely necessary for this logic to be true. And without this statement, this assumption, the logic would not hold. The statement would be false. And in this case, after sitting and maybe thinking for a bit, or maybe it pops out straight up at you, then one of the key assumptions behind this question is that the interview can actually do its job, which is to say that the interview can actually identify which people have unsuitable personalities. Otherwise, the entire logic of the statement falls through. And even if you didn't guess this specifically, even if you had other ideas, then what you would then do is you would go to the answers. And as someone has already mentioned in chat, C is the right answer. And you would see that C is there, which is to say what we thought would be an assumption, what we guessed would be a likely assumption, is actually an answer choice. And usually this saves an enormous amount of time because you don't actually read the questions and you don't actually get confused by all of the different answer choices. And I suppose this is something that you'll see as you practice, but it is a very important part of verbal. Okay, so let me sum up what we've gone over up till now. We've talked a little bit about what you need to learn in order to succeed at the GMAT. And note that this is learning, it's not practicing. It's not doing thousands and thousands and thousands of problems. It's doing a right number of problems and learning from them, learning which solutions work for which problems, which solutions work for you. At ExamPal, we divide these 3 approaches into precise, alternative, and logical, which is to say we group all solution approaches into 3 main categories. And we show you them to you. We show you the different tools available. okay? And so let's say you've done that. And a few of you have said that you've already done the GMAT before. So you've already probably been familiar with much of what I have said. And sometimes what happens when you study for the GMAT is that you study and study and study and study and study, and you get to a wall. You get to a glass ceiling. You get to, like, I don't know, a 600 or a 620 or a 680, and you just can't break that. And this is the step that we call the plateau. And this is the second important part that you need, skill that you need to master in order to beat the GMAT, which is rapid improvement. All right? And in order to break this, usually what you need to do is not more practicing, because doing more of the same will keep you in exactly the same place. What you need is to change up your game. What you need is to learn how to take your mistakes and turn them into opportunities. And we like to divide mistakes into three categories. The first type of mistake is professional, which is to say you just didn't know the material. You weren't well versed enough in number properties or in circles or in the specific vocabulary or grammar rules you needed to know. And you just basically need to go back and review your fundamentals. And this is usually the easiest type of mistake to solve. The second type of mistake is technical. This has often to do with focus and carelessness. So maybe you dropped a plus or a minus, or you simplified an equation incorrectly, or you didn't understand your scribbles on the scratch pad or something like that. And this is actually a significant number of mistakes that students make. And I can just see this in every single private class. There is a significant number of problems that students get wrong, and they ask me about them, and we talk about them. And then they realize that they understood everything. They understood the question. They understood how to get to the right solution. And they just made some kind of sloppy calculation mistake on the way. So if this is the type of mistake that you're making, then it's a very, very different type of mistake from not knowing the material, and it requires a very, very different solution from you. And usually this is to use your scratch pad more carefully, more cleanly, to check your calculations, to maybe take an extra 1 or 2%, a few more seconds of time per question, in order to verify your calculations and so on and so forth. The last type of mistake, and this is really where the PAL system excels, is strategic, which is to say you're just approaching the question the wrong way. You're doing everything right, but it takes you 2.5 minutes to solve a question. What do? This isn't about knowing the material. This isn't about being careless. It's just about being too slow. And being too slow means you're approaching the question incorrectly. It means that there is most likely a faster way that you could have approached the question, which would have saved you those precious seconds and allowed you to solve the questions. Or it could be that you're not using the right guessing strategy. And I think the GMAT has actually confirmed this. It's much better not to guess a bunch of questions at the end of the exam. So first of all, you always want to finish your exam. This has actually been confirmed by the GMAT and by all kinds of tests done by us and others. You also don't want to guess a string of questions in a row. So you want to spread out your guesses throughout the exam. And so this is a guessing strategy. This is a strategic difference in how you approach the exam, which will increase your overall score. Okay. So to break the plateau, to break that glass ceiling, you need to realize which types of mistakes you're making. You need to figure out how to approach those specific mistakes. And note that this isn't practice. This isn't just solving thousands of questions. It's learning. And then you need to implement that. And just to sort of to show you how this all looks in our system, then this is an example of a question. We're not going to go over it. I just want to show you how it looks. Along with the official answer for this question after you've tried answering it yourself. Below the official answer, there's a little bit of insight, a little bit of a note on the intuition, the take-home message from this question. And after that, you have the most important part of our learning platform, which is your personal feedback. And this is how we personalize the learning experience. So if you get a question wrong, then you mark which of the possible mistakes you made in solving that question. Or if none of these work for you, you put in your own mistake. If you get it right, you mark which of the solution tools you used. And as you do this, we learn how you think. We learn which solution tools you use and which mistake reasons you make. And then we can adapt our program to you. We can give you the types of questions that are best for you. And even more than the fact that this is a good tool for us, it's a critical tool for you. Because this is the point in your studying where you pause and you think. You've just completed this question. You need to pause and you need to think about what did you do right or what did you do wrong in that question. Okay, So we've gone over the skills that you need in order to get a 700 on a GMAT. These are cognitive flexibility, and these are rapid improvement, which is to say breaking the plateau. The last 10 or so minutes of this webinar will be devoted to well, your questions and the winning study plan. So how much time should you devote to studying for the GMAT? And for just about everyone, we recommend say 8 weeks. So somewhere between a month and a half to 2 months, to a total of about 120 hours. This is divided into about 40 hours of just learning the fundamentals. Even if you've already taken the GMAT, we strongly recommend that you learn the fundamentals over again. After that, you want to devote about 30 or so hours to practicing. And this is practicing, which is learning, like I've been talking about for the entire webinar, which is to say this is practicing plus understanding how you should practice, how you should solve, what works for you, what does not work for you. Once you've learned all of the material and you sort of know what tools are out there, this is the time for your revision. This is the time to go over all of the work you've done so far, to look at your notes, to sort of summarize things for yourself. And it's also time to take the GMAT CATs. And this is a really critical point. The GMAT CAT is not just a measuring tool. It's not there. I mean, it is there to tell you, to give you sort of an idea of where you are in terms of score, but that's really only the smallest part of the GMAT CAT. All right. The way you should use the CAT is as an amazing research tool, because the GMAT CAT is where you're supposed to bring it all together. You're supposed to bring in your timing strategies. You're supposed to see how you function under pressure. You're supposed to see how your pacing strategies work, you know, and you're supposed to see if you can actually solve questions. And then you take all of this together, and at the end of the GMAT CAT, you have the option to revise it. You have the option to see where you got questions wrong. You have the option to see if you're making the same mistakes as you made during your learning process. So maybe for most people, especially on the CAT, they'll see that they make more mistakes than they're used to. And this is because you're usually a bit stressed when you take the exam, which is, you know, it makes perfect sense. Everyone gets stressed when they take the exam. But this is something that you really, really need to learn how to use the GMAT CAT for. And the last part, and this is sort of variable, it really varies quite a bit by different people, is just improving your verbal abilities, which is to say learning vocabulary, practicing reading. We strongly recommend everyone read every day for half an hour to an hour. And the amount of time you'll need to devote to improving your verbal obviously depends on how good you are at English right now. All right, so if we sort of break this down into days, then what it comes out to is more or less the first 50 days. The first, which is the majority of the studying time that you'll most likely need, is with us to just follow the course trail. We sort of laid everything out for you in a very organized fashion. You can of course skip around if you want to, but we don't recommend that you do. And this covers all of the intros and all of the lessons and all of the practice phases. And usually what we recommend is that you, for each topic, so for example, here on the screen, you can see, let's say fractions and percent is one of the topics on our course trail, is you take one day to just learn the basic material. This is the intros and the lessons. And then use the other day, on the second day, to sort of implement what you've learned, to use the Palgorithm practice system in order to implement that. As I mentioned, we do recommend you read. It can be half an hour to an hour. It can usually be more. If you're the type of person who needs to set like a goal of an hour and a half in order to read an hour, then do it. But you really should read about an hour a day. And mind you, this is of high quality reading. And we provide a list of suggestions on our website, but this is often just high quality newspapers with a slightly science-y flavor. So maybe, I don't know, Scientific American or National Geographic, or the Times or the Economist, or these sorts of things. And just to make sure you don't burn yourself, because that's pretty much the worst thing you can do in your prep, please take a day off a week. Even if you're a really, really good studier, you need that rest. So once you've done that, once you've studied all the material, as I said, you need to review the material. And you can, this is when you need to take your practice CATs. And like I said, you need to take a practice CAT, and then you need to learn from it, and then you need to implement what you've learned. And you're nearly there. And one thing, and I think this is the last time I'll mention this in this presentation, is when you review your mistakes, you really should jot them down. You should jot them down in an error log, which is to say you can have an Excel spreadsheet, for example, or a notebook, or however you like to write notes to yourself, in which you write down the types of mistakes. And remember, we talked about mistakes being divided into 3 categories, which is fundamental, which is to say you didn't know the material. technical, which is to say you were just careless or sloppy, and strategic, which is to say you really need to change up your game. And remember that the goal is to learn. So you need to improve upon your mistakes, not repeat them. And that's pretty much it. That's all you need to do. And then the last day before the GMAT, you just take a day off because you've been working like crazy for the past 2 months. And on day number 60, go and crush the GMAT. I'll get to the questions in the chat in a second. And so this is more or less winning strategy that we recommend for preparing for the GMAT. It involves developing skills of cognitive flexibility, which is to say knowing which tools to use. It involves developing the skills of rapid improvement, which is to say learning from your mistakes. It involves implementing the right study plan, which is to say you want to study enough time so that you understand the material, but don't spread your learning time over 3 to 4 months. Usually by the time you get to the end of that, you'll have forgotten what you studied at the beginning. So generally we recommend 1.5 months to 2 months. If you really need a lot more time and boost in verbal, then you can add another month onto that, but no more. And for those of you with us here today, we have a very special offer in preparation for round 2, which is coming up. You can get 20% off on all packages. A banner is going to be at the top of your screen momentarily. You can click on it. And as mentioned, even if not, please go to our website and create a free user and sign up and check it out. And whatever you do, best of luck in your studies and in your acceptance, hopefully, to the MBA of your dreams and in the rest of your life. And I'm now free to take questions on chat, so please write them in. I see I already have one question, so I'll read it out. Where can I find the list of suggested reading material? So if you just create a free user on our account and you watch the intro to reading comprehension or analytical writing assessment, at the end of it, you'll find a downloadable PDF with a list of suggested reading materials and links, and you can do whatever you want. You're very welcome to all of you saying thank you. I hope you enjoyed, and really this is all about, it's all about personalization. That's what we're about, but this is also what your studies should be about, figuring out what works for you. Any further questions? I see someone typing. I think we have one question coming up. Which OG to refer for verbal other than 2019 OG? The OG, for those of you not familiar, is the official guide to the GMAT. This is the GMAT's basically book. And so first of all, you should be using the latest OG. You can use the others. They change some of the questions between different versions of the OG. They don't change all of them. It's important to say, though, that the OG is not enough to learn from on your own, which is to say the OG can be a great supplement. It's all official questions, which is the best, by the way. These are statistically verified questions by the GMAT itself. And they do have the material there, but what the OG does not teach you, it does not teach you tactics. It does not teach you which different solution methods are out there, and usually it displays the really, really long solutions you're not going to use anyways. So just to recap the answer, you can use whichever OG you like. The best is, of course, the 2019. But I recommend using it as a supplement and not as your main learning material. Okay, next question. Should more focus be spent on verbal or on quant? Or is this unique for every candidate? I think you've answered the question yourself. It's unique for every candidate. What I will say is that if you're not a native English speaker, or you feel that your English is poor, say for example, you skim a few GMAT questions and you realize you're just not up to it, then you might consider taking a month of, let's call it pre-prep. Before even starting on preparing for the GMAT, just take a month to boost up your English skills, just by reading every day, learning vocabulary, that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's more or less even. It really does depend on you. It depends also how good your quant skills are, how quickly you absorb the quant material. And you know what else it depends on? It depends on your score. So for those of you not familiar, there is tables out there which list which help you basically calculate your GMAT score. So If you say want a score of 650, then it tells you what combinations of verbal and of quant are good enough for that 650. And so based on these tables, you know what to aim for. You know which level of quant and verbal, which combination of them you need. Okay, we're over time. So is there one last question that someone wants to ask? Let's see if anyone starts typing. Yes, we have a winner. Okay, one last question. What could be the order to take different parts of the GMAT? So for those of you that don't know, the GMAT can be taken in different orders. You can take either the verbal first, the quant first, or the analytical writing first. Usually, what we recommend is it depends on what your personal style of test taking is, which is to say, are you someone who sort of freaks out at the start of the test and you need time to warm up? Or are you someone who sort of jumps right in but then gets tired further on? So usually I recommend starting off with your strongest topic so that you can sort of ease into the test, and after that your second strongest, which is for most people either quant then verbal or verbal then quant. You might want to do it the other way around. You might want to start off with your weakest topic, so your sharpest, and then do everything else. And I'm being told here that we're out of time. So thank you very much for joining. If you have any further questions and I haven't managed to answer them, then please go to our website. As I said, there's a live chat there. You can just ask questions on the website. A little chat box will pop up in the lower right-hand corner. And as ever, best of luck.